From the moment I first saw her standing alone at the bus stop in the middle of a rain-soaked evening, clutching a paper bag of groceries that was moments away from tearing open, I think a part of me already knew she was going to matter. I didn't know how, or why, or in what way, but there was something fragile and brave in the way she tried to protect everything she held, even though the world around her seemed to be falling apart drop by drop. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks, mascara running like dark streams down her skin, but her eyes were steady, focused, determined. When her groceries finally burst and scattered across the wet pavement, she didn't curse or cry or look for help, she simply knelt down quietly, gathering each item as though it was her last. And something inside me moved, something unexplainably human and urgent. I walked toward her, umbrella in hand, not knowing that this moment, this tiny, rainy collision of two lives, would eventually change everything I thought I understood about love, home, choices, and what it means to offer someone a place they can finally rest. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that remind us of how powerful one moment can be, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles to keep these heartfelt stories coming. I didn't intend to become a regular presence in her life. But life has a strange way of letting people appear exactly when you're not looking for them. In the weeks that followed, our paths kept crossing, almost like the world was nudging us toward each other. I'd see her at the small cafe near my apartment, always sitting at the same corner table, warming her hands around a cup she sipped slowly as if each drop carried something she desperately needed to hold on to. She wasn't loud or flashy or attention-seeking. She existed quietly, almost gently, as if afraid her presence might disturb the world around her. Yet, somehow, she stood out in every room she entered. We eventually fell into small conversations, the kind that start as polite nods before turning into familiar greetings and then into fragments of personal truth shared without meaning to. Her name was Elia. Soft, simple, almost like a breath. Over time, I learned that she worked long hours at a small local bakery, that she had recently lost her mother, and that she was trying to rebuild her life piece by piece after moving away from a past that she only ever referenced in broken hints. She never complained, never asked for sympathy. She just kept going, moving forward with a quiet strength that amazed me. Months passed, and we grew closer in ways that were never planned. I became the person who walked her home when her shifts ended late. She became the warmth I looked for in the middle of ordinary days. We laughed, we shared stories, we held on to simple joys like they were precious treasures. But even as she smiled, there was always a shadow in her eyes, something she was carrying, something heavy, something she was trying to outrun. One late night, after she confessed how exhausting and lonely life had become since losing her mother, I tried to lighten the mood. I smiled and said, half joking, half serious, you know, if life gets too hard out there, you can just move in with me. I've got a couch that's probably more comfortable than whatever you're dealing with. She laughed, really laughed, for the first time that night. It echoed warmly through the street. I didn't think about the words again. To me, it was just a teasing offer, a small attempt to make her feel less alone in that moment. But I didn't understand then how deeply she heard it, or how desperately she needed someplace safe to fall. The next day, she showed up at my door, standing small and hesitant, her fingers nervously twisting the sleeves of her jacket, eyes wide with a vulnerability I had never seen in her before. She took a shaky breath and whispered the words I will never forget, "Is your offer still good?" At first, I didn't understand. I stared at her, waiting for her to laugh, to tell me she was joking, but she didn't. Her voice broke slightly as she repeated, "I don't have anywhere to go anymore." That was the moment I finally saw it, the weight she had been carrying alone, the struggle she had been hiding behind her quiet smiles. Something in me shifted, fuller, heavier, but in a way that felt right. I stepped aside and told her yes, the offer was real, and it always would be. The weeks that followed were not the cinematic fantasy people imagine. They were messy, tender, complicated, and painfully human. Elia wasn't used to depending on anyone, and I wasn't used to someone relying on me so deeply. She carried trauma from a past that left invisible bruises. Some nights, she woke up trembling. Other nights, she sat in the living room staring at nothing, lost in thoughts she couldn't put into words. I learned to be patient. I learned to make space for her silence. I learned that healing is not loud or quick, it is slow, fragile, and often invisible. But I also learned that closeness grows in the simplest of routines. Making breakfast together. Leaving notes on the fridge. Watching old movies until she fell asleep on the couch. Gradually, the apartment stopped feeling like mine and started becoming ours, a place where her laughter lived, where her fears softened, where she slowly allowed herself to exist without apology. For a girl who had spent years running from heartbreak and instability, learning to stay was the bravest thing she ever did. As months passed, she began rebuilding her dreams. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since her mother passed. Sometimes I'd come home to find her sitting near the window with her easel, the afternoon light dancing across her face, her brush moving with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. I could see her returning to herself piece by piece, like watching a sunrise slowly reclaim the sky. But healing rarely comes without testing its strength. One night, Elia received a message from a person from her past, someone who represented the pain she had run from. It shook her deeply. She began withdrawing, avoiding me, packing away her art supplies, shutting down emotionally as if preparing to disappear from my life to protect me from her brokenness. When I realized what was happening, I sat beside her and said nothing, not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood what she needed most. She didn't need promises or speeches. She needed someone who would quietly sit with her in the darkness until she was ready to step back into the light. Eventually, she leaned onto my shoulder and whispered, barely audible, "I'm scared." I told her she didn't have to be brave alone anymore. And she cried, not the trembling, fragile tears of someone holding too much inside, but the releasing kind of tears that fall only when someone finally feels safe enough to let go. After that night, something shifted between us, gently but undeniably. Love, real love, doesn't arrive with fireworks or declarations. It grows in the small, patient gestures. In staying. In listening. In showing up even on the days when the other person feels unlovable. And that was what we built, not a fairy tale, but a home. Months later, as we stood on the balcony watching the sunset wash the sky in soft pinks and golds, she slipped her hand into mine and said, "You know, that day when I asked if your offer was still good. I didn't just need a place to stay. I needed a reason to believe life could be gentle again. And you were that reason." Her words struck something deep in me, something tender and protective. I realized then that letting her into my apartment wasn't the real gift. Letting her into my life was. If this story touched your heart in any way, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Kindness Chronicles so more people can experience stories that remind us why kindness matters. Special request, before this video ends, comment one thing you believe everyone deserves in life. And in the glow of the fading sunset, with her fingers intertwined with mine, I understood something simple yet profound. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with small, accidental moments, moments you don't realize are life-changing until the person standing in front of you asks, in a trembling voice, if your offer of a safe place in the world is still good. Because sometimes, the answer to a quiet, hesitant question becomes the beginning of a forever you never saw coming.